Somewhere in my mom's house, sitting quietly on a shelf, is a machine that the mob used to shake down New York City. A machine that a mayor once attacked with a sledgehammer on live television. A machine that took pennies from the pockets of a nation that barely had pennies to spare. This is the Jennings Little Duke. It was built around 1932, and it has one hell of a story. Let's start with what we're looking at. This is a 1-cent countertop slot machine made by O.D. Jennings and Company out of Chicago. And the first thing that hits you is that face. Cast aluminum painted by hand in this incredible Art Deco sunburst design. Red, orange, yellow, blue, radiating out from the center like a little explosion of color. 90+ years old and the original paint is still vibrant. Right there in the middle, you've got the playing window, but here's where things get interesting. Most slot machines use spinning reels, you know the type, 3 wheels, cherries, bars, sevens. The Little Duke doesn't do that. Instead, it uses 3 flat discs stacked concentrically, all spinning on the same axis. You're looking at them head-on through this window. It was a completely original mechanism that bore no resemblance to anything else on the market. Drop a penny in, pull the lever, and those 3 discs spin and stop one by one. And you can see there are still pennies sitting right there in the payout tray. 90-year-old pennies just waiting. Around the sides, you've got this beautiful quarter-sawn oak cabinet held together with brass rivets. The chrome pull lever on the right side, and on the nameplate right there, Little Duke stamped into the cast metal. Flip it over and there's the original paper instruction label still attached to the bottom. Instructions to prepare Jennings Little Duke for operation. The edges are worn, it's aged, but it's legible. For a machine this old, that's remarkable. That label alone adds 10 to 15% to the value. So who built this thing? The man behind the machine was O.D. Jennings, born 1874 in Kentucky. By 1904, he's running the Spectatorium at the St. Louis World's Fair. A massive hall packed with hundreds of slot machines, the only free attraction at the entire fair. He was working for Mills Novelty Company at the time, and he learned everything there was to know about what made people put coins into machines. Then he did what ambitious people do. He quit and started his own company. He started small, buying up used Mills machines and refurbishing them. But by 1911, he was manufacturing his own designs. He renamed the company O.D. Jennings and Company, and out of his Chicago factory came machine after machine after machine. By the early 1960s, Jennings controlled 40 to 45% of the entire American slot machine market. And the Little Duke, with its revolutionary disc mechanism designed by a Frenchman named E.C. Bignell, was one of his most distinctive creations. Now here's the thing, in the 1930s, slot machines were illegal in most places. So how did they end up on every drugstore counter and barroom shelf in America? 2 words, trade stimulators. See, it wasn't technically gambling if the machine awarded merchandise instead of cash. You didn't win money, you won gum, or cigars, or mints. The payout came from the shop owner, not the machine. And that distinction was the loophole that launched an entire industry. Those fruit symbols you see on slot machines today, cherries, oranges, lemons, those originally represented gum flavors, the bar symbol. That was the logo of the Bell Fruit Gum Company, and the phrase "close but no cigar," that comes from this exact era when cigars were the prize and you almost won one. Picture this, 1933. You walk into Tilton's drugstore on Martha's Vineyard. Right there on the counter next to the cash register sits a machine just like this one. Traveling salesmen dropping pennies between sales calls. Local kids pooling their pocket change for one more pull. The owner keeping an eye on things, ready to pay out a few sticks of gum if the discs line up. It was part of the furniture, part of everyday American life. And it was about to get very, very complicated. Enter Frank Costello. If you know your mob history, you know the name. Luciano crime family, one of the most powerful gangsters in New York. And Costello had a particular genius for slot machines. At his peak, he had 25,000 machines placed across New York City. 25,000, and his scheme was beautiful in its simplicity. He created a front company called the Triangle Mint Company. Every single one of his machines dispensed a mint with each play. That way on paper, they weren't slot machines at all. They were mint vending machines. The fact that winning combinations also paid out slugs you could exchange for cash from the store owner. Well, that was just a happy coincidence. It couldn't last. In 1933, Fiorello LaGuardia was elected mayor of New York on an anti-corruption platform, and he had a personal vendetta against slot machines. He went on the radio and announced, quote, "Let's drive the bums out of town." He dispatched special police squads to raid businesses and confiscate machines. When Costello got a court injunction to stop the raids, LaGuardia ignored it. And then came the moment that made the newsreels. LaGuardia, all 5'2" of him, personally swinging a sledgehammer into confiscated machines while cameras rolled. The photos are iconic, but he wasn't done. He loaded 1,200 confiscated machines onto a barge and dumped them into Long Island Sound off Eaton's Neck. To this day, scuba divers still find them on the bottom. Frank Costello packed up what was left of his operation and moved to New Orleans. And here's the paradox of a machine like the Little Duke. It was a penny slot machine made for the Depression, a time when a penny actually mattered. Think about that. Over 250 companies were making these machines. More than 250,000 units across the country, and they were pulling in over $10 million a year in Depression-era money. An editorialist at the time wrote, quote, "Every nickel in a slot machine during the Depression robs a baby of a glass of milk." The machines returned about 50% of what went in. The other 50%, that went to the operator, the shop owner, and guys like Frank Costello. They called them one-armed bandits, and the name fit. So 90-plus years later, here it sits. Survived the Depression. Survived LaGuardia's Crusade. Survived the Johnson Act of 1951 that made it a federal crime to even transport these things across state lines. This particular Little Duke has its original hand-painted face, its original oak case, its original instruction label. It was never made in large numbers to begin with, so what's it actually worth? Recent auction results for Little Dukes range from about $900 on the low end to $2,600 for exceptional examples. This one, with that original paint and that surviving instruction label. A private collector would likely pay somewhere between $1,800 and $2,500. For insurance purposes, you want to value it at $2,500 to $3,000, not a fortune. But for a 90-year-old penny machine that was never supposed to survive, not bad at all. But here's the thing about family heirlooms. They're not really about what they're worth. This machine has been in our family for years. And every time I pull that lever, I think about the kid at the drugstore counter in 1933, pooling pennies with his friends. I think about the shop owner nervously eyeing LaGuardia's latest raid. I think about Jennings in his Chicago factory, watching his workers paint those sunburst rays by hand. Some things are worth more than their auction price. The Little Duke is one of them.